Okay, so for some of us, the challenge is not just determining what syllables in a word are stressed and unstressed. For some of us, the challenge is making up our own line of poetry that has an ordered meter. And it is pretty difficult. In a sense, what you have to see yourself as is building a string of syllables that fit a preset pattern. So for instance, if it's going to be iambic, pentameter, it's going to have 5 of these unstressed followed by stressed iambs, or sometimes called feet. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These aren't the words yet, but whatever words we plug in have got to follow this pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. And so in a sense, you think of it as there's 10 slots in this line, and each of the slots holds 1 syllable. The pattern, or the meter, requires whether that syllable should be stressed and unstressed. If we take a word like very, which is very, the E is the suffix, the ver is the root word, so it's stressed and unstressed. Okay? So I can take this stressed and unstressed syllable word and I can plug it in. I can't plug it into the first 2 syllables because that should be unstressed followed by stressed. I could plug it in for the second and third syllables. So if I start with an unstressed word like now I have very. Notice how very, it's not a question of whether very can fit or not in an iambic line. It's a question of where does very have to come in the line so that it's matching up with the structure that iambic pentameter calls for. I could take a 3-syllable word like Wisconsin. Now it's Wisconsin, okay? Unstressed, stressed, followed by unstressed. So what I see is that these 3 marks can fall right here if I wanted them to be. Okay? Whereas very can't start an iambic line, Wisconsin can, because it fits the pattern, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. So it could go here, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Or I could have a different first 2 syllables and then have Wisconsin come in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th syllable. Or it could be the 5th, 6th, and 7th syllable. Or it could be the 7th, 8th, and 9th syllable. Okay. So the word Wisconsin can click in, sort of like a puzzle. It can click into different parts of this pattern. Okay. Now if I'm going to follow a word, if I'm going to follow Wisconsin with something, it has to be now a word that starts with an unstressed syllable, followed by starts with a stressed syllable. Because after I use Wisconsin, I've got 1, 2, 3. The 4th has to be a stressed syllable. So I can say baseball. Baseball. Okay. Now if I look, I've got unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Wisconsin baseball is iambic. Okay. Baseball can't come in the first 2 syllables, but it could come in the 2nd and 3rd syllable, or the 4th and 5th syllable, or it could come in any of these syllables that are starting with the stressed followed by the unstressed. Finally, there's words that can't fit anywhere. Okay? Let's go back to remarkable. Remarkable. Now there's no place in this pattern where we have 2 unstressed syllables in a row. So with the word remarkable, it's not a question of whether or not where does it have to fit. There's nowhere that it can fit, because in iambic, every other syllable alternates between unstressed and then stressed. Okay? So remarkable can't plug anywhere into this equation. So when trying to construct iambic or trochaic lines, it makes a lot of sense to start with some words that you know can fit, and plug them in to the equation that is the very definition of what something like iambic pentameter is. Okay, so write out your word, forget about the word for a second after you've already drawn the stressed and unstressed above it, and you should see that this will match up to different parts of the iambic line. Okay, so Wisconsin can be the first word of iambic. Wisconsin cannot be the last word of iambic, okay, because the last three syllables have to be stressed, unstressed, stressed, whereas Wisconsin is unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Okay, so instead of blindly trying to fill out your iambic line or trochaic line, if you're having problems, first draw out the syllable map of how that line has to be put together, and then plug in words that match the requirements of that map.